Welcome to the Age of Superintelligence podcast. We're diving straight into a really fascinating idea today, sparked by a source we've been looking at. It's this notion of a digital cultural revolution.
Yeah, it sounds quite grand, doesn't it?
It does. But when you think about how much has changed online, I mean, it feels like something big is definitely happening. Hard to argue otherwise.
Absolutely. And this source we're discussing, the dawn of a digital cultural revolution, it makes a really strong case that the internet isn't just, reflecting changes in society. It argues it's actively driving them.
And at a speed we've just never seen before.
Exactly. So to really get our heads around this, we're going to look at 3 online trends, things that on the surface might seem completely unconnected.
Right. We're going to unpack first this whole idea of woke culture. Then we'll explore the surprisingly deep world of reborn baby dolls.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we'll delve into the often very polarizing red pill movement.
And like you said, you might initially think, okay, what do these 3 things possibly have in common?
Totally different corners of the internet.
But the source argues they're actually interconnected. They're all sort of symptoms or maybe facets of this larger cultural upheaval that's being fueled by how connected we all are online now.
So our mission, really, in this deep dive is to try and understand the forces behind these movements. What are they actually telling us about ourselves, about the society we're building digitally?
Yeah, looking beyond just the maybe surface weirdness sometimes and finding those deeper currents. What's really going on in this digital revolution?
Okay, let's start with woke culture then. It's a term you hear absolutely everywhere online. But what does it really mean in this digital context?
Well, the source traces its origins back to African-American vernacular English.
Right.
Woke originally meant being really aware, particularly of racial injustice.
Right.
But online, its meaning has definitely broadened out. It's become sort of a shorthand for a heightened awareness of all sorts of systemic inequalities. Race, gender, sexuality, even things like climate change.
And social media platforms have just poured gasoline on that fire, haven't they? Acting like this huge amplifier.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
We've all seen how fast individual stories or calls for justice can spread. Think about hashtags like hashtag Black Lives Matter or hashtag #MeToo.
Yeah, huge examples. They started as online things, but led to real, tangible changes offline.
Precisely. And the source talks about this mechanism, calling it viral accountability. A single video, maybe, or a personal story shared online, documenting some kind of injustice. It can suddenly get global attention, almost instantly.
The speed is just staggering.
It really is. Unprecedented reach.
But it also brings up some tricky stuff, right? Like the difference between someone genuinely supporting a cause versus, say, a brand jumping on the bandwagon, what some people call performative allyship.
That's a really key tension the source explores. You have grassroots activists pushing for, deep systemic change, and then sometimes you have corporations doing maybe more symbolic things.
Yeah.
It makes you question who's really driving the change and what genuine progress looks like in these online spaces.
And then there's the whole cancel culture discussion. That generates so much heat.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like the same online tools that lift up voices for good can also be used to, instantly condemn someone.
Yeah.
Sometimes without much nuance.
Yeah. And the source doesn't really shy away from how complex that is. It brings up important questions like about due process online or the possibility for forgiveness, for redemption. It's definitely not simple.
So looking forward, what kind of lasting impact do you think this digitally powered woke culture might actually have? Is it changing things long term?
The source suggests we might already be seeing some effects, things like maybe slightly better representation in media or the rise of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives in companies.
Okay.
Even changes in school curricula, focusing more on anti-racism, for example. I think the big takeaway is how the internet has sort of decentralized moral authority. Anyone with a phone can potentially highlight something they see as wrong.
Okay, right. Let's shift gears completely now. Let's talk about reborn baby dolls.
A very different vibe.
Yeah. For anyone who hasn't encountered these, they are hyper-realistic dolls. I mean, incredibly lifelike. And some people collect them, care for them, almost like they're real babies. It can seem, unexpected.
It could definitely seem unusual from the outside, but the source offers some really interesting potential reasons behind it, both psychological and cultural.
Like what?
Well, think about the times we're living in. Lots of uncertainty, right? Pandemics, climate anxiety, political polarization.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So these dolls might offer a kind of comfort, nostalgia maybe, for something simpler, more innocent.
Okay, that makes a certain kind of sense. A retreat to something comforting. But the softs also mentioned something about digital intimacy creating voids. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's this paradox. We might feel connected online, following influencers, having parasocial relationships, but still feel kind of emotionally empty sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And the reborn dolls offer something tangible. It's an inanimate object, sure, but it's a form of attachment that's very low risk. It's entirely on the owner's terms.
And it's not always just about comfort, is it? The source mentioned people using them to express identity or explore parenting feelings or even process grief.
Exactly. Things like coping with the loss of a child, perhaps. It really challenges our usual ideas about caregiving. And interestingly, you have these global online communities forming around reborn dolls, connecting people everywhere.
Mm.
But the source also makes you wonder, does this trend also reflect a kind of growing isolation in the modern world, despite all our digital connections?
That's a really good question. Okay, let's move to the third phenomenon,
Hmm.
the red pill movement. This one definitely has a different energy again.
It certainly does. The source explains the name comes from the Matrix, taking the red pill to see the real truth, however uncomfortable.
Right, the wake-up call idea.
Yeah. And online, especially on places like YouTube or specific forums, it started apparently more as a kind of self-help thing for men.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, large parts of it have become, well, pretty radicalized.
And the core ideas, as the source lays them out, things like hypergamy, this idea about women marrying up, and these alpha-beta male hierarchies, plus a strong critique of feminism, of political correctness.
Yes, those are central tenets. And the source goes into detail about how the online environment itself can actually speed up radicalization. Algorithms play a huge part.
How so?
Well, they're designed to keep you engaged, right? So they might guide users from relatively mainstream content towards more and more extreme viewpoints just based on clicks and watch time.
It's like falling down a rabbit hole, but the algorithm is pushing you.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the source also points to the language used, specific jargon, memes.
Like red pill itself, or MGTOW, men going their own way.
Exactly. Those act as in-group signals. They build community, reinforce a shared identity, often defined against perceived enemies or outgroups. And you can't ignore the role of charismatic influencers using platforms like live streams or podcasts to spread these ideas.
And the impact. The source notes it's complicated. Some guys might claim it helped with, say, social anxiety, but there are huge concerns about misogyny, online harassment linked to the movement.
That's definitely a major concern highlighted in the source. And importantly, it also mentions counter-efforts. Feminist activists, social justice groups using the same digital tools to push back, to challenge those red pill narratives.
So it's like an ongoing online battle for ideas, really.
You could definitely see it that way, a contest for cultural influence playing out digitally.
Okay, so we've looked at woke culture, reborn dolls, the red pill movement, pretty different things. How does the source tie them all together under this big umbrella of a digital cultural revolution?
Well, the core argument is that despite the differences, they share common roots in how these digital platforms actually work, what the platforms allow.
Okay.
First, there's this idea of decentralization of authority. Traditional gatekeepers, like big media outlets, they just don't have the same control over the conversation anymore.
Right. Anyone can potentially start something online.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A viral moment, an online community, they can bypass the old channels and gain massive influence. Second, there's the speed, the acceleration of feedback loops.
Things just blow up so fast.
Incredibly fast. A niche discussion today can be a global headline tomorrow and then maybe fade away or change into something else just as quickly. It's constant flux.
Okay, decentralization, speed, what else?
And third, the source talks about identity as a kind of performance online. We're all constantly curating how we appear, right? And this online fluidity allows cultural categories to expand, but also to fracture in ways we haven't really seen before.
So it's not just these isolated weird trends. It's a fundamental change in how we connect, how we form beliefs, how we push for social change, all driven by the technology itself.
Yeah, the source even compares the internet's impact to massive shifts like the printing press or the telephone. That's how significant it sees this change.
Wow, that's a heavy comparison.
It is. It suggests these aren't just small tweaks. They're fundamentally reshaping community, authority, how we basically live together in this digital age.
Now, one thing the source tackles head on is this feeling you sometimes get, this idea that maybe all this online stuff is just collective insanity.
Right. It's tempting, isn't it? You see some of these trends and just think, what is going on?
Yeah, exactly. But the source argues against just dismissing it like that.
It does. It suggests what we're seeing is probably closer to social contagion than, actual mass psychosis. Ideas, emotions, behaviors, they spread incredibly fast online, like memes or fads.
So people imitating each other, reinforcing ideas?
Kind of, and especially because platforms often amplify strong emotions and simplify complex things to get more engagement, it makes ideas spread faster.
And the echo chambers definitely play a part there, right? If you only hear voices agreeing with you.
Absolutely. It makes even pretty fringe ideas seem totally normal, maybe even majority opinion, within your specific online bubble. And the algorithms, as we mentioned, often feed into that by showing you more of what you already seem to like.
Okay, but why does it sometimes feel so crazy then? Why does it feel like everyone online is losing it?
Well, the source points to a few things. One is just the sheer speed and scale. Cultural shift that used to take years, decades maybe, now happen in, weeks. It's disorienting.
Yeah, the whiplash.
Exactly. And also, think about what goes viral. Often it's the extreme stuff, the highly emotional content. So we end up seeing the loudest, most sensational bits amplified.
Makes sense.
Plus, there's the blurring between real life and carefully crafted online personas. That can definitely add to the feeling that things are a bit unhinged.
So if we're not supposed to just call it mass insanity, what's a better way to understand these phenomena, according to the source?
It suggests looking at the underlying needs these trends might be meeting. What human desires are they tapping into?
Okay, like what?
Well, for woke culture, maybe it's a need for solidarity, a desire to fight injustice. For reborn dolls, maybe it's about comfort, connection, nurturing, even with something like the Red Pill movement. Maybe for some, it taps into feelings of being lost or needing a sense of belonging or control.
So trying to understand the why behind it, not just the what.
Exactly.
Don't
And
like
critically understanding how the platforms themselves shape behavior through their algorithms, through what they reward. And of course, you can't ignore the wider context of the social, economic, political stuff happening offline that creates the environment for these things to emerge.
So the big picture is, it's not necessarily madness, but more like a messy, sometimes weird, but ultimately understandable cultural evolution happening super fast because of technology.
That's a good way to put it. These trends often tap into basic human needs, belonging, meaning, agency. Just calling it insanity stops us from seeing what's really driving it and distinguishing between genuine problems and just collective adaptation.
And it makes total sense why seeing some of the online extremes might make someone feel like, okay, everyone else is nuts, I'm checking out.
Yeah.
The source talks about that feeling too, right? Wanting to withdraw.
It does. And it points to things like digital negativity bias. Algorithms often push negative, dramatic stuff because it gets clicks.
Yeah, outrage travels fast.
Exactly. So your feed can feel like this constant stream of conflict, making you think that's all that's happening online.
And we tend to think other people are more influenced by this stuff than we are, right? The source mentioned that too.
Yeah, the third-person effect. Oh, they're all falling for it, but I see through it. It can lead to mistrust, this feeling that everyone else is easily swayed.
And if someone's already prone to anxiety, seeing all the online fighting could just make them want to shut it all down.
For sure. It can reinforce that kind of all-or-nothing thinking. It's all toxic, I need to get out completely.
But the source draws a line between taking a healthy break and just completely isolating yourself, yeah.
A really important distinction. Stepping back to recharge, to maybe reassess how you use online spaces, that's healthy. But cutting yourself off entirely because you think everyone else is irrational, that can lead to real loneliness and actually narrow your perspective even more.
Okay, so for people feeling that overwhelmed, the source actually offers some practical tips, strategies for navigating all this without losing your mind.
Yeah, some concrete things, like being really intentional about curating your feed, choose trusted sources, mute the noise.
Okay, be selective.
And maybe seek out smaller scale interactions, more intimate online groups, or just prioritizing face-to-face connection offline.
Makes sense. What else?
Trying to practice perspective taking. Instead of just dismissing different views, maybe ask questions, try to find some common ground, however small.
Harder than it sounds sometimes, but yeah.
Definitely. And setting boundaries on how much you engage online, rather than building total walls. Maybe specific times, or limiting exposure to certain platforms.
Right, managing it rather than banning it.
And finally, really cultivating offline rituals. Hobbies, exercise, time in nature, things that ground you in the physical world and balance out the digital intensity.
That's all really helpful stuff. It's a good reminder that real connection is still possible, maybe just in smaller, more intentional ways.
Exactly.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive on the digital cultural revolution, based on our source, what's the final thought you want to leave people with?
I think the source ultimately argues that really trying to understand these shifts, woke culture, reborn dolls, red pill, all of it, it's not just interesting, it's crucial. It's essential for actually navigating this digital world we're all in, and maybe even having a say in where it goes next.
A powerful thought to chew on. If you liked this deep dive, do not forget to subscribe to our channel, Age of Superintelligence, on YouTube.